blockchain technology is being used in the crisis. And for me, this example here, which I've got up, is just the most fascinating and amazing example to describe the power of blockchain technology and what it can actually do for the world, if I can put it that way. So there's a concept that's often used in this space to say that using blockchain and using cryptocurrencies, money becomes programmable. It becomes a line of code that you can program the way it behaves and what it does and how it works. And I'd always struggled to sometimes explain this concept to people. And then I saw this example of something that happened on the weekend, and I thought, this is the best one I've actually seen so far. So the European Union organized a hackathon called the EU versus Virus Hackathon on the weekend. There were a huge number of big corporate companies which took part in it, and they had 20,000 participants that all developed some use case around how they could use technology to beat the virus, if I can put it that way. And there was a concept from an organization, I don't know if my pronunciation is correct, so called Alouette. I think it's French, or actually I think they're from Belgium, but they had this idea around, right now the European Union is looking at the concept of helicopter money as an alternative to quantitative easing. So this principle essentially gives money directly into the hands of citizens, as opposed to using some of the QE concepts that are being used in America to stimulate businesses or bail out businesses and things like that. And the idea with helicopter money is you drop, like a helicopter would do, you drop that money into people's bank accounts. But what they've done is they've gone and tokenized the euro and using blockchain and made it programmable money. And I'll get into the details of what that means. So under their entire stimulus package to help the European Union at this time, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're putting in something like 4.3 trillion euros across Europe. And they've said that if we were to take 10% of that and use it as a helicopter money or tokenized euro to give to people, how could we do it? And some of the research shows that any time that countries have done some sort of drop like this in the past, it's essentially contributed about 0.5 to 0.6% in terms of GDP. So the cost and the time that it takes to distribute the money is huge. They find that people go and spend it on luxury. So you'll go and buy an expensive handbag or TV or something that is not really supporting what it should be. And the other thing is a lot of people end up saving it. So it doesn't actually end up going back into supporting the country and supporting small businesses and GDP like it should be. But with the concept at the hackathon on the weekend, the idea here was to rather use blockchain to distribute this money to people, and they estimate that it will contribute somewhere around 2.3% towards GDP in Europe, which is 4 to 5 times bigger than what has happened when countries have done something in the past, which is similar. But the interesting part around what makes this programmable money is what they're doing is they're giving 900 euros in the form of a euro token or programmable money into a virtual wallet that people get on their phones. So if you have a European ID number and you're over the age of 18, you are entitled to receive this money. And essentially through a QR code, you can go to a number of merchants and retailers and actually spend that money. But the interesting part is it's been programmed that it can only be spent on certain goods or services or at certain retailers. So you can't go and spend it on a handbag at Gucci in Paris if you wanted to. And the other thing is they've built in that the value of that money loses value if you don't spend it. So they really want to encourage people to stimulate the economy by spending it. And essentially after 1 month, your euros would be worth 25% less. They'll only have 75% of their value after a month if you haven't spent them. And they're encouraging people to spend this money, on a regular basis. And then the final one is they've incentivized merchants to actually accept this tokenized euro as a form of payment, and have said to merchants, if you do accept this, you can actually use this money to pay your tax obligations in terms of that and corporate tax back to the government. And they've provided some incentives around shops and grocery stores and things like that actually accepting the money. The last one, which I really loved, was they've also allowed citizens the option to donate the money to charity. So if you have been given the 900 euros and you're in a financial position where you don't need it, you can donate some or all of it to a charity organization, and then that charity in turn can go and spend it. And it's literally, through an app that people have, they can transfer it from one wallet to the next. So I just thought that this was such an amazing use case of the distribution of money. And the company that's done this for the European Union has said that the development time is roughly 4 weeks to get this entire process up and running. So it's just a fascinating one for me. The next one I wanted to touch on is actually closer to home. So it's some UCT students that have that fall under Professor Co-Pierre George at the University of Cape Town. And I know that this particular topic has been in the media quite a lot around the concept of an immunity passport around the COVID virus. And it's receiving a lot of criticism and a lot of recognition because there's other big companies like Google and Apple that are also looking at it. But essentially what it does is it allows a user to download an app onto their phone where they are able to say whether they have, number one, contracted the virus before, whether they've been recently tested, for example, if and when a vaccine was to come out, if they'd actually had that vaccine. But the point of having this application is that your data remains private. It's not sitting in a central database that anybody can have access to. And I always use the concept that in blockchain, people often speak about the concept of self-sovereign identity. And I use the example to say that if you were to go into a bar and the barman, says, can I please see a copy of your ID? That barman actually doesn't need to see your ID. He doesn't need to know your name, your ID number, how old you are, anything. He actually just needs to know whether you are legally allowed to drink or not. And the concept around what the UCT students are doing is that your data is essentially private to yourself and it's stored on your phone, and you can decide who has access to that data or not. So if somebody wanted to know, have you had the vaccine, they just have access to yes or no if you give them access to that data. It might be valuable in a year's time if you wanted to board an airplane and the airlines, for example, had a policy around things like that. And then the other application that they're using is to say, you could enable Bluetooth and geolocation tracking as part of this application, and it would track your movements. At the same time, the data would be kept on your cell phone. It wouldn't go to any centralized database, but it would send you an alert to say, right, you were in Woolworths 10 days ago, you were within a 5-meter radius of somebody else who also has this app and has recently registered on the app that they are COVID positive, please be aware, or your, right now your neighbor might have got it, so, don't go and speak over the wall. Or so it's really there to alert people around the movement of it. And I think that countries that are managing the virus are using a lot of mechanisms to track people. Singapore particularly did it well in the beginning when the virus first broke out in Singapore in February. I know recently they've had a second wave and things aren't quite as successful now, but they were also using technology to try and track people and see who they'd been in contact with, to try and minimize the spread of the virus. And then at the same time, they're saying that this app could be used on an ongoing basis if the virus does mutate in much the same ways as flu does. And they're also looking and saying, can we incentivize people through the app to actually practice social distancing and perhaps self-isolation at home, and say to them, okay, like Discovery reward you for vitality, can we reward people via the app in the same way? So this is for me just quite an exciting innovation coming out of South Africa. Hopefully it's not too controversial, because I know that there are some international ideas that are similar and have received a bit of scrutiny, but I still think it's a very exciting one to watch.